Welcome, and thank you for attending my presentation. My name is Carmen Cernuska, and this is a risk assessment for a fictional organization looking to decrease their vulnerabilities to cybercrime. A request came through to perform a risk analysis of the current system for the electronic health records. The risk analysis has been completed to date, and it assessed the electronic health record system for its integrity and to identify any threats and vulnerabilities. Risks to the network encompass any threats or vulnerabilities that could exploit the system. The longer a system is not secure, the risk increases and provides an avenue for the network to be taken hostage and all of its highly sensitive patient data with it. Networks on their own are vulnerable and must be protected. So to provide a broad overview of the findings, the following slides will identify the threats and vulnerabilities that were uncovered and solutions for them. When the assessment was completed, it uncovered viruses, spyware, or otherwise known as malware, ransomware, phishing attacks that were successful in getting through the email system, as well as numerous super user accounts with unlimited privileges that could very easily be used by cyber criminals. Lastly, we found that the patches and updates that should have been completed are very behind, and this also leaves the system very vulnerable because it is not using the highest levels of protection. So with this information, I will go further into detail of each vulnerability and threat and how we can help solve them. The recommendations will be presented further to this. So let's begin with viruses and malware. As we moved through the system, we noticed that staff could download almost anything they wanted, and some staff had games downloaded from some questionable sites on their computers. We would recommend a firewall, as well as anti-malware software, to stop staff from being able to download from anywhere they like. When speaking to the staff, they did not seem to have much knowledge with regard to what viruses or malware could look like. Phishing attacks, for example, were something they had never heard of. The current antivirus software is outdated in terms of its updates and will need significant time to get it up to the most current version. As all of these items can be catastrophic if left unchecked, it would also be in your best interest to look at improving your current backup system to include a disaster recovery plan. All backups are saved to your system and not off-site or on a separate server. If there was a security breach, a cybercriminal could potentially wipe out all of your patient's health information or steal it or otherwise compromise it. Currently, you are at risk for cybercriminals to be able to damage or disable your programs, steal passwords, or create traffic in your network, causing extreme bandwidth issues, or even worse, a full downtime. Next, we'll take a look at ransomware and phishing. Phishing allows ransomware to enter the system via email, better known as phishing. So if a phishing email comes to a staff email and they do not recognize it for what it is, and they open the links inside of it, they will essentially leave the system open to attack. The ransomware that comes with the phishing email will take hold of the system, and the cybercriminal will lock you out of your systems until you give them what they demand, because they would be able to encrypt your files, computer, or network, and only they would have the key. So again, education for the staff with regard to what phishing emails look like and what to avoid is the first step. Programs such as Hyper-V can isolate a device that has left itself open to ransomware via phishing. Embedded into Microsoft Outlook can be programs which can isolate those questionable emails. By adding this Every time a staff has an email they aren't sure of, they can click once and the email is removed and placed into quarantine, thereby protecting everyone else and the patient data as well. Next, we took a look at super user accounts. A super user account is a privilege and not a right. Consider looking at job descriptions and tying their access to specific job descriptions so that only those that require it have it. Their permissions would be very specific. The ability to download can get dicey, and there can be long-term issues if the wrong type of file or program is downloaded. What could happen to the patient's data? By specifying each user type, then groups can be created and permissions given accordingly. Plus, tracking the way these accounts are used. Whenever someone leaves the organization or goes off on an extended leave, what happens to their access? It did not appear that there was a plan in place for such instances. Monitoring should be in place so that unauthorized access does not occur via these accounts that are essentially unmonitored. Dormant accounts can run a very high risk to the organization. It is much more approved to have every account monitored and checked in on so that there can always be a tracking in place. And by educating the staff about this level of tracking, it also puts it in the back of their mind so that they're not looking for loopholes where they might be able to do things that they really shouldn't be. Next, we'll talk about patching and updates. So updates are global changes to a program, and sometimes these are features, they're nice to have, or improvements in cosmetics. Whereas patches are an update, but they focus on the security of the program and its vulnerabilities. So a vulnerability has been found, and now there's a solution, much like the whole process that we have undergone with this risk assessment. This seems to be something that is not done with any regularity, and several programs are outdated in their updates and patches. There should be a dedicated person who is constantly looking for these updates and patches and assessing how they can be fit into the maintenance without disrupting the entire system. These are very important because without them, you could be leaving the system vulnerable to threats. These are already done by the vendor of the designs. They don't have to be done and created by your staff, whereas the vendors provide them to you. You would just have to update your side of the house. There may be some downtime required, so this is why someone should be constantly looking to see when these patches can be deployed and what provides the least amount of disruption to the clinical team while providing a safe system for patients' data. This is considered to be low-hanging fruit because the programs you have typically all come with routine patch notifications. So the vendor should notify your point person, and then these can be coordinated to be updated within the system. Another type of solution that could be considered for your organization, if it was chosen, would be looking at secure sockets layer certificates because of the transmission between other organizations. So these encrypt the information shared between the server and the browser. And I noticed that you do have some content that is accessible from browsers. So what you want is that the intended recipient can access it at the other end, but only the intended recipient can reach it. You do not want this somehow to be intercepted and someone else able to get a hold of the information for your patient. Personal health information is a particularly sensitive type of data that requires this level of safety to keep it out of the wrong hands. As they're known as SSL certificates, they can show as being verified to the person receiving the information, so they know they're receiving it from the right source. So if you're dealing with other organizations and transmitting data, you also can tell whether they do have this SSL certificate in place as well, which just adds another layer of security. So, to review, in closing, as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, and all of these fixes cannot be implemented in 10 minutes. Consider what you think to be the highest on the priority list, and also those that could be low-hanging fruit, such as the patches and updates. The data you hold is so very important to your patients and should be your primary focus as well. Quick wins could also be a thought for education of the staff while it's ongoing, and they're less complex, so less disruption overall. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. My references are as attached. Thank you.